this episode, we're going to be talking about conscious loving through all phases of life.
Welcome to Thriving Launch with Louise Congdon and Kamala Chambers, the show for heart-centered entrepreneurs who want it all.
5 days a week, we bring you different segments to inspire you to live a life of freedom. We interview the leading experts in the field of business, health, and love. Be sure to check out Training Tuesdays, where we give you a clear action plan to grow your own business.
How would you like to be able to interview world-class experts, sit down and have chats with people like Jack Canfield, Marianne Williamson, Robert Kiyosaki, Tim Ferriss, you name it? Would you love to interview other people that you really admire and consider to be your heroes? Well, we've created a course for you that teaches you how to podcast, how to set it all up, and how to get going so that you can really have a successful show and you can do it properly. Over at thrivinglaunch.com, we have a podcasting course, and it's there for you, waiting for you to snatch it up. So head on over to thrivinglaunch.com and let me teach you how to podcast the right way. Today's guest is Dr. Gay Hendricks. He's a top-selling author, motivational speaker, counselor, therapist, and someone whose work has really impacted my life. His book, Conscious Loving, completely shifted the way that I do relationships. And his book, Conscious Loving, is actually one of my top recommended relationship books of all time. So without further ado, it's an honor for me to bring on Dr. Gay Hendricks.
So great to have you here. Are you ready to launch?
I am.
All right. Well, really excited for your new work coming out with your new phase of life, moving into your 35th year of you and Kathleen together, which is just so beautiful. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about moving into an everlasting relationship, what that means, and how a relationship changes over time.
Great question. Yes, well, Kathleen and I have just celebrated our 35th wedding anniversary, so we are right in the, just had that big ceremony yesterday, so that was really a lot of fun. And had a lot of our friends over with us on Saturday, where we read a couple of poems we'd written for each other. And one of the things that's important in the second half of life, particularly like from age 40 up, we just finished the paperback edition of our new book, Conscious Loving Ever After, just came out. And so we've spent about the last 10 years or so working with people primarily in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and some in their 80s about what it takes to create lively, alive relationships in those years from 40 and above. And it's important when you're 20s and 30s too, but after you get up into your 40s and 50s and 60s, it becomes really important to think of every choice you make as a choice between creativity and stagnation. Creativity or stagnation. The great developmental psychologist at Harvard, Erik Erikson, once said that particularly in the second half of life, every day you choose between what he called generativity and stagnation. And basically, generativity is what we mean by creativity, which is the ability to keep discovering new aspects of yourself and to keep discovering new aspects of your partner. And one of the most important discoveries we made over the past 10 or 15 years when we were working with several thousand people in the 40 and above category is that if you can dedicate yourself to your own creative process, it also makes your relationships go better. Because when you're excited, you're discovering more things creatively about yourself. It allows you also to see your partner as a living, changing person instead of thinking of them as the same old person all the time. The more you discover your own creative expansion in yourself, the more you're able to see that creativity and facilitate that creativity in your partner. And it also is the same thing for single people too. Over the years, we've worked with about 20,000 single people through our program called Attracting Genuine Love, which we have taught for many, many years, which has a program both online and in person for single people who want to learn how to manifest the love of their lives. And so it's important if you're single also to get really involved in your own creativity, because the more you can open up exciting new vistas in yourself every day, that allows people to discover more of you. And so, one of the things that's important, especially when you get into the second half of life, is to make a real, very deep, profound commitment to your own creative development. And we say you only need to start with 10 minutes a day. That's been our discovery, that even people who just put in a tiny bit of like 10 or 15 minutes a day on whatever their creative process is, they see an immediate change in their relationships. And it doesn't have to be, when I say creativity, it's not about composing a symphony or writing a poem necessarily. It's about discovering something new, like even if you're making a soup that you've made 48 times over the last couple of years, change something about it today, make something a little bit different about it, so that you have a chance to really reinvent yourself on a daily basis.
I really love that. I know when I was first starting to kind of get into the relationship world, I was really focusing on trying to find a partner and attracting the right partner. And then I read some piece of work that said, if you want to be really attractive to other people, you have to think about what makes you attractive to yourself. So what do you love doing? What are the things that bring out this aliveness? Now, this also, it led to me meeting more people that were available, that were really exciting, and being attractive was very easy because I was, as you say, Gay, in my zone of genius. My question for you, though, really is about, okay, so I'm thinking, what if I'm in that second part of my life, the kids have moved out, I've been working, had a same job for a long time, and all of a sudden, I don't have that same job anymore. The kids have left the house, and I'm not sure what that next level of creativity is for me. Now, for the rest of us that are younger, I know that I get stuck sometimes and don't know how I'm going to be creative. And so now I'm just projecting myself out. What if I was older and life was different? But the question is still relevant to anybody. How do we get in touch with this creative part of ourselves?
It's a lot about learning to listen to little quiet voices inside that you may not have paid attention to. I'll give you an example of a dentist, a man who's a very successful dentist that was around 40 years of age. And he and his wife had been going through various stuck places and things hadn't been going very well. And I asked him, going back throughout your whole life, thinking back to even before you started school when you were a kid, what were the things that you most loved to do? And interestingly enough, he loved to write little things. He was, sometimes he'd write poems and sometimes he'd write little articles and things. But he was kind of a born writer, but he had put that away completely when he got into his dentistry career. And so he hadn't picked up a pen to write anything in many, many years. And so I suggested that he start taking 10 minutes a day to just sit and write something, even if it was the same sentence over and over again, just to get in the groove. And interestingly enough, he started writing these really excellent little poems and ended up getting several of them published even, which was very thrilling to him. And that's just an example of the kind of thing that can spark off a whole new life path for people, because the moment he touched into that, it began to have an immediate positive effect on his relationship too. His wife noticed it. He noticed it. He had kids still at home. They were teenagers. Even they noticed it, because when we can fire off the spark of creativity in ourselves, it's a spark that's contagious. It kind of echoes around our community and our family. And so, for example, I love writing is my thing too. And I go in my little den back here where I'm doing this interview from. I pop in here every morning around 5:30 and I write for a couple of hours. My wife likes to sleep in. Katie likes to sleep in. So I write for a couple of hours until she gets up. And so it's a time for me to commune with that deep creative part of yourself. And you don't need 2 hours of it, but just a little bit of it every day is what's necessary to keep ourselves really feeling that zest for life feeling inside. The other thing too is that a lot of us, especially when we get up into our 30s and 40s, we tend to have problems with our overall life purpose. a lot of times, you've heard of the famous midlife crisis. Well, what that really is a crisis of purpose. And I can't count the number of people I've had in here over the years, especially people around 40, 42 years of age, often very successful people. Like I'm thinking of a guy who came in and he said, I've been a lawyer now since I was 27 years old. I'm 42 now, so I'm really successful at it. I make $300,000 or $400,000 a year, and everybody likes being a member of the country club and all that kind of stuff. But I feel like I'm dying inside unless I can find some other place to connect with in myself. And so many of us have a crisis of purpose when we get especially up into midlife, where we realize, what are we doing this for? What are the key things that are really driving me? That's why I wrote that little book a few years ago called 5 Wishes, because one of the best things you can do to get in touch with your life purpose is to sit down and write a list of your 4 or 5 most important wishes for your life. And you can do that when you're 25 or 35 or 55. And I've even had people in here in their 70s asking that same question. Like, let's say you've got a year left or 5 years or 10 years left, whatever you've got left, let's spend it doing things that make you feel more and more alive. And one of the best ways to do that is to really just sit down and do a little bit of thinking and cogitating on what are the 5 most important things that I want to accomplish or experience in my life. And I started asking that question when I was in my 30s. And at this stage of the game, I've accomplished all of my 5 wishes, except number 1, which was to create a loving relationship with a woman. And I've since done that, and I still want to keep doing that every day. That's still number 1, because I've found that when my love life goes well, my whole life goes well.
Wow. I'd love to hear what you do after you create your 5 wishes.
Well, you get busy making those real. Like for me, when I first flashed upon this, I was in my 30s. And at the time, I was just getting started in my relationship with Kathleen. So this goes back to 1980 or so, 1981, somewhere along in there, quite a long time ago. And I realized that there were these 5 big things that I wanted to accomplish in my life. Number 1 was to create a lasting love relationship with a woman with whom I could grow over the years. And number 2, I wanted to find out how to live in a state of completion with everyone, my friends and family and everyone, so that there wasn't anything unsaid or unlistened to in my relationships with them. So my first 2 wishes had to do with relationship types of things. My third one was I wanted to learn how to write from my heart. I was originally trained in my Stanford PhD program to do scientific type writing, journal articles and scientific research type writing. But I wanted to learn how to write from who I really was inside, not just to summarize research, but to speak from my heart. So I began to learn how to do that. The fourth thing I wanted was to somehow learn how to connect with, on a daily basis, the creator force in the universe. I'd always been interested in spiritual things, but not necessarily, religion, organized religion. I didn't connect too much with that, but I wanted to have some sense of organic spirituality that I could draw on every day. And so that led me to start meditating and doing other things like that. And my 5th wish was I simply wanted to learn how to savor life, to appreciate what was going on, to be grateful for what's happening in life every day. And so that's an ongoing thing that, I'm certainly more skilled at savoring now than I was 35 or 40 years ago. But 10 years from now, I want to be even better at it than I am today. But just appreciating this moment, being present in this moment, enjoying whatever is going on at the time.
One thing I noticed about your 5 wishes is that they could be dramatically different than many of the types of wishes that I know I've sat down to do, especially before I was impacted by really deep spiritual work. I know that my wishes or goals were more like make $1 million a year, have a fancy car, and have a really special, intimate relationship. And that one's a little deeper. Do you suggest anything around how we voice or write down or create these 5 wishes? They really feel like intentions for me too, but Do you get what I'm saying, Dr. Gay? Because I feel like some of us might just go to, I want a house on the hill. It needs to have 5 bedrooms. I want this kind of car. And yet when I hear you talking about your 5 wishes, they're fairly different.
Yes. Well, what I recommend is that we consider in your imagination, imagine yourself being at the end of your life, looking back over all of your life. And you ask yourself, was my life a success? At the end of your life, if you say, yes, my life was a success, then you ask yourself, what is the number one thing that I accomplished or experienced that makes me call my life a success? And then you say, okay, let's say I had that. Then what would be the number 2 thing that if I enjoyed it or experienced it or had it happen to me, what would be the second thing that would make me call my life a total success? And so I've had the opportunity, I don't want to be morbid here, but I have had the opportunity of being around people as they were passing out of this life, and they tend to want to talk about the love in their lives. They don't ever say things like, I wish I'd watched more TV, or I wish I'd gone to the office a little earlier every day. What people are frequently talking about are things of the heart. And so I want to make sure that when everybody creates their list of 5 wishes, make sure you consult your heart as well as your head.
You know, it's such a beautiful thing that's so easy to overlook. And part of the consulting of the heart is this creative way of being. And I'm curious, how do you recommend couples who have been together for a long time, how do they keep that passion and that creativity in the relationship?
The number one thing, Kamala, is to make a commitment to it. We've had many, many people here in our office that really didn't know how to make a meaningful commitment. So we have people, like sit there and face each other and say, I commit to discovering something new about you every week for the rest of our lives. Or we'll say, have people, I commit to spending at least 10 minutes a day on my own creative processes. And so making those commitments is the place to start. Committing, I commit to creating an exciting relationship with you. To be able to say that to your partner in a heartfelt, sincere way is really the starting place, because until you're committed to something, until you can actually feel yourself making a sincere commitment to it, there's no reason it's going to show up in your life. Just like, if you want to climb Mount Everest, it takes a powerful commitment to that. And then even every step of the way, as you go up the mountain, you're often going to slip out of that commitment when you get tired or you get an altitude headache or something. So you need to keep returning to that commitment all the time. But the great thing about a commitment is that it gives you a firm place to stand. If you know deep down in your heart that you are committed to creating a lively, creative relationship with your partner, that's a great place to come home to when you slip off of that.
That's beautiful. I know one of the things that happens for me is that I tend to forget my commitments in the whirlwind of life. Sometimes I get wrapped up and can go on automatic, and no matter how hard I try, I find that, I can develop certain habits, and there's still other things that I'm working on that I consistently return to and heal those or work on those areas and create new intentions. And in that area, life is like kind of, we're always balancing this thing and improving and making it all better and looking in areas where we really want to get more out of our own lives. I'm curious, is there something that you recommend for us so that we can have a healthy way to return, or healthy reminders to return back to those intentions? Because I know that the more I practice returning to those intentions, the better I get at it. Like, for example, I know that for a while I did a practice where I had a little note card. I cut it out about the size of a credit card. And so I typed up some stuff, put it on this card, printed it off, cut it out, and then laminated it. So it was laminated and it could go in my wallet. So throughout the day, I'd pull out this little card and it had different intentions on it. What do you recommend so that we can consistently remind ourselves and stay in that essence?
Well, I do the same thing. I have little Post-its all over the place when I'm working on changing some aspect of myself. What I like to do is to put down write down the affirmation or whatever it is I'm focusing on. Like I can see one from where I'm sitting here that I keep in my office all the time. It says, "I choose easy world where everything is easy." And that's to remind me when I get to efforting too much to just ease up a little bit, to let it be easier. Nobody knows exactly what the meaning of life is, but I'm very sure it's not to have a bad time. I'm very sure it's not to struggle. And so whenever I get caught up in struggling or efforting too much, that little sign reminds me to take a couple of deep breaths and choose easy world again, where everything is easy. So I think those kind of reminders are great. I also want to really stress this idea of carving out a little bit of time each day for yourself, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, where you can just be in communion with yourself. You could do some kind of formal meditation. I've been a daily meditator since the early 1970s, so I've got 45 years of meditation where I go into myself each day, twice a day, and kind of drop into that deep space in myself. And so one of my students got out his calculator and figured out that I had something like spent close to 15,000 hours of my life in meditation. And so when it's just like anything else. If you spend 15,000 hours of your life driving a motorboat, which I don't know how to do, I'd be very good at it. But in meditation, it's the same kind of thing, except you're driving your own cosmic motorboat through the cosmos.
Yeah, it's so great. And I love how you've simplified things for us so we can actually apply all of the things that you're talking about today. It's been so fantastic. We've been here with Gay Hendricks. You've been listening to the Thriving Launch podcast. We've been talking about conscious loving through all phases of life. Keep thriving, everyone.
Real honor to have you here today, Dr. Gay.
Thank you very much, folks.
You've been listening to the Thriving Launch podcast. For books and resources related to today's episode, make sure to head over to thrivinglaunch.com. We'll see you there.
One of my favorite authors is Marianne Williamson. And in our next interview, we'll be sitting down with Marianne Williamson to talk about how to return to love, how to grieve, how to mourn, and how to live a happy life. So be sure to tune into our next episode with Marianne Williamson.